So someone's listening to this conversation and they have a child who is somewhere in this window of being ready to start engaging with literacy, and the child is not enrolled in a Montessori school, the parent's taking the lead in driving this progression. What would be your top pieces of advice for replicating some of this at home? Because some of what you're talking about requires more specialized materials, which a parent, may be able to acquire, but also maybe doesn't want to spend resources on. Like the level of some of the games that you're talking about are totally doable at home, but the level of some of
Right.
this is sort of contingent on how many resources a parent wants to throw into learning how to do the Montessori approach and buy the materials and stuff. But what would be your biggest recommendations for taking a Montessori inspired approach to literacy in the home as a parent?
Right. I mean, like you mentioned, there's so many of the games that you can just do at home. It really not very many materials required at all. Like you can play the sound games where you're practicing hearing the sounds that words start with just using objects around your house. You don't need any special figurines. You can pick out some of their toys. You can pick out objects from the kitchen, objects from your office, and you can introduce them, make sure the child knows their name, and you can play the exact same games. Can you find the one that starts with S? And they grab the stapler, right? Like you can do the same kind of practice with phonics, and you can make it more challenging as you go, like not just the beginning letter, but the ending sound of the word. So you can level it up that way. Um, and then, I mean, you don't need the Montessori materials specifically either to do the further steps. Like if you want to introduce the letters of the alphabet, you can DIY your own kind of version. Like you could get note cards and glue glitter in the shape of the letters and make your own sandpaper letters. And it has that same tactile effect where they can trace it with their hands and you can tell them the sound. Like there's so much creativity if you want to do it from home, because the approach in essence is really simple, um, and you don't need the full materials to do them.
And do you have any recommendations if a parent is really excited to introduce some of this to their child, but their child doesn't have a lot of exposure to the like focused Montessori work time and so is maybe easily distracted or just isn't super excited? So the parent tries to introduce the child and the child is not focused and is trying to hijack the game and turn it into something else, or gets distracted really easily and wants to go run outside and see the squirrel that's climbing up the tree or do something else. Do you have recommendations for either helping to develop that focus on time or bringing them back into the lesson, or maybe what the appropriate amount of time is if they're really disengaged to wait before you reintroduce it? Do you have any advice for parents in that regard?
Right, like, I wouldn't stress out about, "Alright, I've set up this time to do the language lesson, and now they're doing something else." Like, what are like, you can observe your child. What are the things that seem to draw them in, catch their attention, and, you know, don't interrupt them when that's happening, and find more opportunities to do activities like the one that you see they get engaged in. It's often, if we're talking toddlers, it's gonna be something with food or something with water. Those are often the things that are really gonna draw them in and want to make them focus, and you can spend a long time, weeks, months, just doing activities like that. Just setting aside part of your morning, a couple hours where there's no time pressure, for them to just engage and really get into a state of flow, and then, reintroduce language games or language activities a little bit later once you see them, developing focus like that.
If you could change one thing about how literacy is approached in the average conventional classroom, what would you change?
Ooh, that is such a good question. I Here, because here's something that we didn't really get to talk about much. I would change this idea that English is not a phonetic language, and that spelling and learning how to read is just they're just these sight words that you memorize what they look like, and that's how you learn to read them. Um, Most words in English are phonetic if you know the rules. Um, there's lots of rules. English is a bear. I'm not going to lie that English is not a challenge, but you can learn the rules. A child can learn them. They can learn the patterns, the IGH or SH. They can learn that there are these rules, and they can sound out words. So I think that would be the number one thing I would change. Get rid of sight words. Sight words don't need to exist. If you introduce the spelling patterns, just like we're introducing all of these other aspects of learning to read in an engaging way with games and with tactile, hands-on experiences, they can learn even those in a way that's fun.